Hello everyone, and welcome to my March garden tour. Today is March 3rd. The temperature outside is 59 Fahrenheit, 15 Celsius, and I thought I would start today in the greenhouse. So what you're looking at now is some potatoes. These are actually not a commercial variety. These are grown from true potato seed. I grew them a couple of years ago, and I just saved some tubers in the refrigerator. So the tubers sat in the refrigerator for more than a year before getting planted out here in this container. Potatoes are a little hard to grow in my climate. Not impossible by any means, but getting a good yield is difficult because no matter how early you plant them, they will be maturing in the heat. This idea of growing them in a container, starting them in a greenhouse while the weather is still cold outside and there are regular frosts is kind of new. I'm just going to see how it works. These are actually growing in very poor medium. It's mostly a mix of soil and wood chips, but hopefully I'll get some yield off of it, and the ones that do best I can plant and try again next year if I decide the experiment is successful. Another container very similar. This one's got a little basil in it and some peanuts, really just stuff left over from doing some germination testing. I wasn't trying to grow these things on any scale. And we got the good rutabagas here, the ones that are not outside. Those are still quite stunted. I'll talk about them in a minute. These are beginning to form some roots. Let me see if I can come in here and you sort of see the base of the plant there. It is beginning to form a root here in the greenhouse at least. They are taking a little heat stress. The greenhouse gets quite hot during the day sometimes, even with it still relatively reasonable outside. I have a lot of tomatoes and peppers started. They're actually started kind of early, but they'll be okay. I just have to pot them occasionally. And then we got some basil there. It always flowers really fast in a pot. Some spare collards. I've got some collards planted outside now, and some spare celery. It's the same situation. It's also planted outside, and I think it will probably do okay. I'll show that in a minute. So sweet potatoes are going a little bit wild here in the greenhouse now. The main purpose for these plants is that I will take cuttings from them when it is time to plant sweet potatoes outside. So most of these are actually a white variety that I can use as sort of a substitute for white potatoes. They don't quite have the right texture, and as mashed potatoes they are a little bit sweet, but for frying they actually make a pretty good substitute for white potatoes. So on the tomatoes, this is a tomato plant that is actually growing in this big heap of well, not very good compost, lots of wood chips. You can see some damage on it right there. That is actually frost damage from inside the greenhouse. We recently had a cold snap. The temperature got down to just a bit below 0 Fahrenheit, around -18, -19 Celsius. And I couldn't keep the greenhouse warm enough to prevent freezing at those temperatures. So I'm gonna have to think about that for next year. It doesn't get that cold that often, but most of the plants that are in here were kept alive by taking them indoors rather than leaving them in the greenhouse. This one was obviously rooted out here, and I couldn't do that. It does have some flowers on it. Let's see. There we go. There's a clear picture, maybe. A little better there. Okay. I don't know if it will form any fruit in here or not, but it's just an extra plant. It was getting pretty big, so I left it sitting there. And if it produces any tomatoes, they will be cherry tomatoes. That is a Sun Sugar cherry tomato. A few other miscellaneous odds and ends here. It's figs, oregano, lemongrass, stevia. So let's go outside in the garden and look what's going on out there. So the first thing that's sort of happening here is that my rhubarb is coming up for the spring. So I wasn't really expecting it to come back so soon. It's only been dormant for maybe 6 weeks, but this one plant is coming back up. There's another one that's coming back up. There should be 5 in total. I don't really expect them all to return. This is not a great climate for rhubarb. It gets very hot in the summer. But I'm trying it, and we'll just have to see how it works. I might let this go to seed this year and collect some seeds to start some new plants, especially if there are 2 or 3 of them that come back. This is, the variety on this is Victoria, which is a rhubarb that's grown from seed. So in the main garden, elephant garlic still doing well. My few yellow potato onions that are still growing, also still doing well. Rutabagas. Okay, these were planted in December and they are still tiny. As a food production experiment, then clearly the answer is no, that you cannot plant rutabagas in my climate in December and expect to get a crop in any reasonable time. It remains to be seen if they are permanently stunted or if they will come back a little later in the spring and take off. They are still growing a little bit. I've only lost one of them, and I don't think I lost it to the cold. I think maybe a bug got it. It was sort of cut off at the base, so maybe a cutworm or something. I don't know. Over here, these are the Welsh onions. If you sort of look closely at them, you can tell that the leaves were sort of damaged, like right there, above a certain point. And that is because they're leaf killed when the temperature gets really, really cold. So below 0 Fahrenheit will kill the leaves. However, there was snow, and so the snow sort of protected the lower parts of the plants. And that happens in a few other cases in the garden as well. One in particular I'll point out in just a minute has to do with some oats. But we've also got wheat over here. The wheat is doing really well. It has sort of perked up. That's a good sign that it has come out of dormancy for the spring. Usually in the winter it kind of lays a little bit flat and it doesn't grow very much at all. It's beginning to grow faster, so it has sort of come out of dormancy. It's standing up. It will actually be really lush by the end of March, but it's doing quite well now. So the overwintered barley, also doing very well. Some of my supports here for the plant covers have sort of broken down from the weight of snow that was on them. I'm going to have to do a little work on that. I want to leave them in place to help support the plants against lodging, because I have noticed that the barley does tend to fall over a little more than the wheat does, and so I'm going to have to do something with that. I'm also going to have to go in here and mulch a little bit between the rows to help support the plants. It's not critical that it get done right away, but it is something I'm going to have to do. As you can see out here, I have been putting down some wood chip mulch in the garden. It's really kind of a very thin layer, since I'm going to have to be planting stuff in that area over there where you see that greenhouse cover. That's ultimately going to be sweet corn, and it won't be planted till April. I don't want to have to dig through 6 or 8 inches of mulch to plant stuff in it. So for the time being, it's just a thin layer. This area right here where the dirt is still bare, you should be able to see the oats there. There's also a little bit of rye coming up in it, and I'm going to have to go through and weed it. This will probably be ready to mulch in about a week, and when I do that, I will go through and try to take out some of the rye that's in it. But really, that rye is not going to present a huge problem. There's not so much of it that it's going to be a big competitor for the oats. I'll just have to let some of it go. Now, on more conventional plants that are coming in for spring planting, right here I have some fava beans. Now, I have never been able to get a successful harvest from fava beans. I keep watching YouTube videos from people in Britain, and they go and say, "Oh, fava beans, they're so easy, they're so easy." Well, they have a longer cool season. Here, it will go from too cold to overwinter them to too hot to grow them so quickly that they just burn up. So maybe I can get something this year using this greenhouse to help protect the plants a little bit. We'll see. I'm planting in February. It's still like 6 weeks before the average last frost date. They're doing nicely now. We'll see what happens. I've also got some bulbing onions here. Most of my onion needs are met by the green onions, but it is nice to have some bulbing ones every once in a while, so I do have some planted. This is celery. If it gets really cold, I don't know if this is going to survive. It will get the greenhouse cover over it, but we'll just have to see. It's doing nicely so far. Then there's some little tiny spinach here. The whole row isn't spinach. There is a couple of lettuce plants at the far end. I am redoing seedlings for lettuce. My seedlings didn't do well, but hopefully I can still get some lettuce at some point. Very small plants here. Pull out some of that rye. That's a collard plant. Those seedlings also haven't been doing great, but I do have some spares if these don't make it. And I expect them to probably do okay. I don't think there's going to be a problem with cold on collards for sure. The row cover here is just keeping the ground moist. There's some carrots sowed under there. They're not up yet. Also not up, I'm going to try some parsnips. We'll see. I'm pre-sprouting the seeds and just planting them as the sprouts come up. We'll see. Only 2 of them have sprouted so far. Parsnips are pretty unreliable at germinating. Maybe not as bad as spinach, but yeah, they're not the sort of thing that you're just going to plant and you're going to see them coming up in a couple of days. Now this bit, I'm surprised is still alive. Looks like grass, it's oats. This was planted a little bit before I planted the oats that you can see in the other video. I might put a card up to indicate the video if you want to go watch it. I was expecting this would get killed by the cold temperatures. We basically had 3 days when the temperature did not get above freezing, and as mentioned before, it got down to -2 Fahrenheit, and I was kind of expecting this to get killed. Now, it did have snow protection, but it lived, and I think that's a very good sign for any future trying to grow oats over the winter that I might attempt. Otherwise, nothing really new in these bins. It's still just ground cover stuff. Lush looking rye. Some peas not looking so great. Here's some elephant garlic in there. It's looking okay. The current plan on these bins, by the way, for the summer garden is the stuff that's in it is going to get moved, except maybe that elephant garlic. And I'm going to be planting, I think, peppers and peanuts in these beds. So I got plenty of peppers going, and I'll be able to transplant them in here. And then we'll have the peanuts. And I actually think that they'll be good candidates for these beds because the beds get pretty hot, so the soil is very warm. I think the peppers will like that. The peanuts will be pretty easy to dig in this sort of soft soil that's in them. They can be pretty hard to dig in my regular soil, but I think in these raised beds they'll be okay. So beyond that, at this corner of the garden, I'm just sort of preparing the soil. I did a little light tilling. I don't do much tilling, but I will do it if I think that it's going to give some benefit. Here at this corner, there was previously a small greenhouse. It sat here for 2 years. There was landscape fabric on the ground to keep weeds from growing up in and around it. And so the soil got a little compacted. This is not a deep till. It's just a little light cultivation and working in some organic material in the surface layers. I'm just going to plant corn in it next year, and I think the corn will help break it up a little bit. But this is all probably going to get covered by a tarp until I'm ready to plant it, so that I can keep the weeds down a little bit in it. And hopefully we'll be doing okay with that. So I am planning this March to do at least a couple of content videos in the garden that are not just tours. I did the planting oats last month. This month, there's not going to be a whole lot of planting going on, but maybe I'll do a seed starting video. I know I'm going to have to dig up my fig trees to get the mulch off of them that was protecting them from the winter weather. So we'll see how that works out. But anyway, that is the garden tour for March. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment, share, all the good stuff. It will help with the channel and will allow others to learn that it exists. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in a future video.